but yeah, so going back to that, like for one, The Last of Us, the original Last of Us, that's Pantheon for you. It's been what, 10, 12 plus years since that game came out.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about The Last of Us, the TV series now. It is, as I say, the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious about if you want to expand on kind of what you were talking about, because you were making a pretty interesting connection. We're all kind of talking about how like IPs, either from movie or television, are affecting games, and how games, this is a difference where the game is kind of affecting a television IP, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of like, yeah.
So like The Last of Us series right now is doing amazingly well.
Mm-hmm.
I read something, I forget what it said exactly, but like The Last of Us series is like the top 6th most watched right now. Like ever.
Like ever? Oh wow.
Yeah, like it is up there. Like and it's doing very well with the gaming fans as well, which is the big elephant in the room, I guess. Because like for a great example, the Resident Evil stuff, the newest movie and the original 6 or 7, most of the gaming community is not a fan of those.
Right.
But here in The Last of Us, they're loving it. You know, some of them are like, oh, well, this didn't happen. This just changed a little bit. Like, you obviously can't put exactly everything in a game in a show. Because there's just some stuff, you know, just fighting bad guys. Like, that's just so you have more to do in the game. If you're just walking around a city, oh, another cutscene, walk around, another cut, like, that's boring. So they need to give you a little action, and they need to give you, like, oh, you need to find your bullets, and you need to find items to make stuff. Like, they're not doing that in this series. Sorry, spoilers. But, you know, it's still very close. Like, they're doing scene for scenes from the series to the game. Like, you can play the TV episode and a cutscene from the game, and they are very close. And I think that's where they're doing very well, because they don't do that with Resident Evil, for an example again. You know, they're taking the IP and just putting their own twist on it.
Yeah.
You know, like, they're slightly doing that with the Last of Us series, but they're still very tuned in to the game. So what I wanted to talk about was, is this possible with any game, or is the Last of Us series only working because it's almost realistic?
That is a good question. I don't think the reason is because it's realistic. People don't have any problem watching sci-fi TV shows or high fantasy TV shows. I think it has to do with The Last of Us is a great game, but it's also an amazing story. And that's what really propels it to be able to transition into a TV show, that the story is so good that, you know, gamers love it, and people that don't like games would also like it because how good the story is. So if your game has a decent story, you can transition into a different media and do really well. And if your game doesn't have a story, you're going to have to kind of make it up yourself and hope that the original fans don't feel slighted by it. So that's my little take on it. How about you, Jim?
Okay.
Yeah, I'd pretty much reiterate very quickly. It's poop in, poop out, right? The Last of Us show is starting with what I would argue is probably, I don't know, probably one of the 5 best written games ever made. The story of The Last of Us is exponentially better than the game of The Last of Us, at least in my opinion. So, yeah, you don't have to do a lot of tweaking and modifying. You can just write scene to scene from the game, because it is that well written. The show, I mean, I have my opinions about you know, the director of, or the original director writer of The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann, and the show creator Craig Mazin. They're both incredibly talented individuals. who are somewhat self-important. But they are both incredibly talented. So you have high talented quality original writing. You have the high quality person that originally made it, and then you have someone of high quality that's able to interpret and bring it to screen. I think that helps. If you look at other games, if you start with poop,
you're gonna end with it.
You're gonna end with it. I mean,
True.
I don't. It depends. I don't. I think the fact that it's just realistic. I mean, I don't know. I think if you take the time, someone could probably put together a really, really good Mass Effect television show, right? It also depends on the medium you want to do, whether it's show or movie. I think a lot of times people look at games and they say, let's just make a movie of it. And I think television actually relates a lot better to it.
I mean, video games are super long form, and TV shows
I was
are
gonna
long
say
form.
you get a lot
So it
more
matches
in
up.
episodes.
Exactly. Yeah. And that way I think you got to pick your spots. Now, as much as we can look at the TV show like The Last of Us and say, well, yeah, that's an example, right? Also, at the same time, don't we also have Halo going on Paramount Plus? And that's not getting anywhere near as one of the reception as far as writing.
Right.
Because, and I would say for the most part, Halo has pretty high quality writing. I don't think any of the writing in Halo reaches the bar of The Last of Us, but I don't think it's poop. So, in some instances,
I haven't really kept up with the Halo show, but do fans of Halo like it?
No. Then
it's hard.
Yeah.
If the fans of the original don't like it, it would be hard to convince other people to like it. I would assume, I haven't watched The Last of Us yet. Fans of The Last of Us video game probably really enjoy The Last of Us TV show. There's not much to hate. It's like David said, almost copied, scene for scene in a lot of instances. And it seems like they've made smart, smaller changes that don't really upset people. So yes, the fans of The Last of Us like the show. Other people will like the show. The Halo show, Halo fans didn't really vibe with it. Why would anyone else care about it? Sorry to cut you off, Jeremy.
That's a good point. But it does make for, sometimes, I also feel like you're more apt to just get that response from gamers. Like gamers are going to be more upset about something they deem not being translated correctly on screen from, we hear it all the time. You mentioned it earlier, like people that read the books of stuff that ends up getting translated to a movie or something like that. There's always some gripes, but they're usually a lot tamer, and they're a lot more like well-reasoned. Truthfully, gamers a lot of times don't have a lot of well-reasoned reasons as to why they might not like something.
They're fickle, man.
True, yeah.
Fickle.
Yeah. So, I think that, I definitely think that's part of it. But as far as like the need for being like realistic, I don't think that's necessary, though I do think it helps. The Last of Us does such a good job of giving us incredibly human and vulnerable characters that I think is really easy to connect with it from a writing standpoint, and obviously from like playing the game. So I think the hardest thing, just in my opinion, that one of the hardest things about writing is creating human connectable characters. And that's a huge weight that the writers of the show don't have to lift because it was already done 10, 15 years ago when the show or when the game was originally wrote. So